it takes years of gradually undermining and weakening undermining of the dam structure by burrowing animals or erosions, lack of maintenance, water saturation, seepage, and other factors. When a dam is sufficiently weakened and undermined from within, it reaches a tipping point so that all it takes is a small storm to hit it, and the structure gives way to a breach that lets loose a wall of water. That's the nature of dams and the nature of breaches. And that's what's happened in the Catholic Church today. In this particular area of LGBTQ ideology, the dam has been eroded and undermined for decades by lack of fervor, bad doctrine, and lax discipline. And this action was done by theologians who promoted what the authors call homoheresy inside the church. And we believe that the document, Fiducia Supplicans, is one of those tipping points, a storm, a big storm, a storm in the middle of this great crisis that opens a breach. The authors claim, quote, that such a gigantic change in the Catholic Church's doctrine and pastoral care could not have happened overnight. The homoheresy has spread by infiltrating Catholic institutions and environments in the 60s with moral laxity and homosexual ideology. And that's what I like about this book. It abundantly documents many undermining acts that raise the rainbow flag inside Catholic institutions and universities since the sexual revolution in the 60s. And it does so without going into too much detail. You don't get bogged down. It gives you just enough facts to understand the picture, nothing more, nothing less. And it outlines the doctrines which do not hesitate to call a heresy, a homoheresy, that teaches not only just wrong behavior and practice, but a heretical doctrine and theology to justify it. And even better, the book lists the promoters of this heresy and what they did. It reads like a who's who in the Catholic left over the last few decades. I'm sure you've heard of some of these people. You'll recognize people like Father Charles Curran. Anybody? Yes, I think. Charles Andre Gaudon. He's from Canada, so you're excused for not knowing him. But Father Anthony Kosnick, Father Daniel McGuire, Father Robert Nugent. Actually, he's from around here. And Sister Jeannine Gramick. She's still alive and busy. Today, the main figurehead is Father James Martin, S.J., who gets ample mention in the book. The book also features non-American figures who promote this agenda in Europe and Latin America. And we can have no doubt that this penetration is worldwide. It's everywhere. So all these doctrines, events, and figures have undermined the dam of the church's moral teachings. They have been doing this for decades, even before the council. The ground has been fully prepared for the moment of the Fiducia Supplicans Surrender and the breach. So in this book, you get a full snapshot. It's easy to piece together the process that brought us to where we are today and where we might go in the future. Now, the second takeaway point is even more shocking. These Catholic figures and structures are not just reluctant followers going along with a toxic ideology. Church figures are becoming its primary promoters, movers, and shakers. If the homosexual movement were limited to the less than 2% of the population that make up their numbers, the threat would not be nearly as great as it is now. What makes the movement such a powerful threat is that it can count on the full weight of the establishment, the political, business, education, and cultural establishment, to promote its cause. And we see this everywhere. I mean, think Bud Light, or Target, or Los Angeles Dodgers. Think public libraries or drag queen story hours. These people in the establishment are willing to put up with great financial loss to push this revolution forward. It's not about the money, but the powerful attraction of sin that overcomes all barriers, even financial barriers. However, the most important part of the establishment is the religious establishment, because it does, by definition, have an enormous influence in our lives. We pay attention to religion, because we all sense that our eternal destiny is at stake. And when our eternal destiny is at stake, we pay attention. And it pains me to say this, but it is true. Many church officials are now on the cutting edge of the homosexual revolution. They're out front, leading their flocks and our country astray. And there's no attempt to hide it anymore. The book shows how the dam is breached and the water pouring in because of these religious figures that promote the cause, and I might add other figures that do not condemn it and do not condemn this cause, and so push this revolution forward. The reason why their undermining work is so devastating is because the LGBT movement is attacking the dam of God's moral law from within. Destroying something from within is always more effective than outside forces, even though those outside forces are important. The authors call these religious radicals a fifth column. A fifth column is a term that's used in the Spanish Civil War. When the communists were attacking Madrid, the communists said, well, how are you going to overcome Madrid? He says, well, we have four columns, and they're going to attack from all sides in Madrid. And we have a fifth column inside, and they're going to undermine the defenses from within. So they call these religious radicals a fifth column that is led chiefly by priests and nuns to promote the homosexual cause within the church under the pretext of pastoral care for same-sex pairs. And this is happening at the highest levels of church government, including the statements and actions of the present pontiff, cardinals, and bishops that favor this revolution in all sorts of ways. The homosexual revolution is not only the work of isolated individuals or clergymen or theologians, but it also involves the complicity of some of the most prestigious Catholic universities, theological schools, religious orders, and other Catholic institutions. They're putting the prestige of the church and its institutions at the service of this ideology. Indeed, if you go to the Wikipedia page of Father James Martin, the Rainbow Jesuit priest, you'll find that he has 22, count them, 22 honorary doctorate degrees from Catholic universities, and most of them Jesuit. He just published a new book dealing with the rainbow subjects. The foreword is written by Pope Francis. Father James Martin is quoted by all major media. He's frequently commentator for CNN, NPR, Fox News, Time Magazine, Huffington Post. He has written op-ed pieces and blogged for the New York Times. That's to say that all the religious stops have been pulled out to help this revolution advance. In addition, the support of the LGBT cause goes beyond the written or spoken words and statements, and institutional support. It applies to gestures and symbolic acts that are often communicate ideas better than words. And this explains the importance of the symbolic act of blessing couples or pairs, homosexual pairs, for example. This blessing has been on the agenda for many, many years. Activists see this as a validation of their lifestyle. Fiducia Supplicans is a major step towards changing the culture. And despite denials that the blessings do not mean approval of the union, the impressions of such blessings is quite the contrary to all the watch on world and social media. No one has any doubt about what they mean. The authors note, quote, that in the cultural war to normalize homosexuality, symbolic facts are as important as spreading ideas, perhaps even more so, because they mobilize people's emotions and feelings, which today matter more than principles for much of public opinion. And so let me conclude by saying these figures are radical, very radical. And let me just give you 3 examples of just how radical these people are. These are all also from the book, and they have many, many more. So my first example is that of the German Bishops' Conference, which is pushing this revolution ahead. They are the authors of what is known as the German Synodal Way, a new way of governing the church through democratic models. And one of the official documents of the German Bishops' Conference says, same-sex sexuality, also realized in Acts, is therefore not a sin that separates from God, and is not to be judged as intrinsically evil. The Catechism of the Catholic Church should be revised as part of a necessary reevaluation. Homosexual acts must be removed from the list of grave sins against chastity in the Catechism. So this is a bishops' conference where almost all the bishops are on board. My second example is that of a Swiss theologian, Daniel Bogner. According to him, the same-sex union can have a sacramental character if we reconsider what marriage is. And so he says we need to have a renewed understanding of the sacrament of marriage that would include the fact that marriages can break up. This is, why are we all so obsessed with the fact that they have to be indissoluble? We also need to get rid of this rigid fixation on biology and the necessary of the heterosexuality of the spouses. Fertility should not be understood exclusively informed in terms of biological reproduction. He says he believes we must rethink the sacrament of marriage and free it from past forms and base it instead on the very real ways of loving between people. So this is a Swiss theologian. And the final figure is Luxembourg's Cardinal John Claude Hollerich, a central player in the synodal church. He's not only calling for changes in marriage, but for a new assessment of homosexuality itself. He says, I believe that the sociological, scientific foundation of Catholic teaching is no longer correct. What was formerly condemned should now not be. He says, when the church teaching was made, the term homosexuality didn't even exist. It was a new word. Even in the time of St. Paul, people had no idea that there might be people attracted to people, others of the same sex. So he's a denial of the reality of things. A historic denial of what he affirms this. But the philosophy of all these figures is that love is love, and therefore contains something that's good and holy. And some figures even go so far as to defend pedophilia. It's gone that far. All right, my third and final point that you can take away from this book is the most important and impressive. You might think, well, how can that be, since the first two were quite overwhelming? It can't get worse than that. And I would agree, it can't get worse. But fortunately, the point is not about getting worse. It's a consideration about the scope of this fight. My third point is that the stakes are very high in this battle. The breached dam just shows how much is at stake. It is impressive because, by way of contrast, we cannot help but be impressed by how important the church is. This is not a minor discussion of morals or lifestyles. It's about the destruction of morals itself. The fight lies at the center of the course that will determine the world's future. Like it or not, the church puts all of us as Catholics in the center of this fight. It forces us to see the grandeur of the church and what she represents. The church is the obstacle to this revolution. And we can say to ourselves, I'm part of this obstacle. Mr. Laredo and Mr. Oretta, they affirm that, quote, in Western society, the Catholic Church is the great dam that protects the strongholds not yet conquered by the neo-pagan revolution. The church, based on the gospel and natural law, is the principal force that prevents the far-left ideological currents from achieving the goals of liberating everyone to follow the unbridled passions and return to pagan and satanic times. That's to say, the church is not just one of many churches that resist this. It is the one true church. And even in its present state of internal crisis, the church is the single most important threat to this LGBTQ revolution. And the enemies of the church know this. The LGBTQ movement knows this. Without the support of bad elements of the church, their movement is doomed to fail. And the authors believe that the homosexual movement and transgender ideology, if successful, will lead to the dissolution of the family and the erasure of moral principles on which any civilization worthy of the name rests. The wall of what remains of Catholic teachings is the only thing preventing chaos from taking over the world. And the other side knows this and fears this. We know that they know that any resistance to this agenda, however small, inside the Catholic Church is very powerful. And we hold in our hands the power to thwart this program, and we must do so. But it depends upon our fervor. Throughout history, fervent Catholics have overcome outstanding odds to defeat the enemy defeat this enemy with the least number of faithful. We do not limit ourselves to the natural means at our disposal, but rather count on the grace of God to help us and on the powerful aid of the Blessed Virgin Mary, who smashes all heresies, including homoheresy, as she has done so many times in church history. And thus we have nothing to fear and everything to hope for. Now, before moving on, I'm going to summarize what we've seen. We have seen three things, three takeaway points about this book that help us understand the crisis better and fight more effectively. The first thing we saw is the massive scope of the LGBTQ crisis inside the church. That is to say, we've made a proper evaluation of the enemy. And the key to understanding this is the metaphor, the breached dam. The dams are usually breached by the undermining effects of internal fights weakening these structures, not from outside. The second thing we saw was how the radical elements inside the church are not reluctant followers or participants. They are now the cutting edge of this revolution. They are leading it. Without them, the revolution would not go ahead. And I mentioned the radical actions of several religious figures as examples. And finally, we saw that the stakes that are involved are very great, and how the church is the only obstacle that can stop this revolution. And any resistance can have the greatest of repercussions if we engage in the fight. And that's why it's so crucial that Catholics just don't sit back and hope the storm will go away. It won't. However, the church provides everything in the line of sound doctrine and divine grace to overcome her enemies. And thus the church must resist, challenge, and denounce this monstrous denial of Catholic teaching. The bridge dam is a weapon you can put in your hands to engage in the fight. It gives you a very solid foundation from which to base your action and take the offensive. So I would ask you then to consider three facts that are also found in this book that will encourage you in this fight, wherever you find it in your daily lives, especially in the month of June. The first thing is that this movement, despite its great power, is not popular, and it does not enjoy overwhelming support from the public. The media make it look like everyone's on board, but they're not. And this is the homosexual lobby's greatest weakness. It's built on the myth, supported by the liberal establishment, that its ideas are universally supported by all peoples and it's useless to resist. And that myth, like so many revolutionary myths, is false. The homosexual lobby is the work of a radical yet active minority and a cowering liberal establishment. But huge sectors of public opinion reject this cause because they consider it sinful. The lobby does everything to make it appear that we are the insignificant ones. Indeed, even elements inside the church portray it that way. Pope Francis claimed that resistance to Fiducia Supplicans consisted of those who protest vehemently and belong to small ideological groups. The problem is that these small ideological groups include the majority of the bishops' conferences of sub-Saharan Africa, which represent 1/4 of all the world's bishops. It consists of countless Catholics like you and I who fight in the public square. It also includes those against homosexuality or afraid to speak out. After reading this book, you'll understand that if there is a small ideological group of radicals imposing itself upon the population, it's the homosexual lobby, not us. They were the ones that were condemned by the Congregation for the Defense of the Faith, for the Doctrine of the Faith in the 90s, not us. But encouraged by Pope Francis's openings, it has raised its head and conquered space in the 11 years of his pontificate. And so however, they do not have the numbers or support that the media attributes to them. They are vulnerable because especially when this revolutionary myth is unmasked. And the book says even in a very liberal place, there is opposition. It says the homoheretical current lacks popular support even in Germany with those bishops that direct the synodal way. Germans are against this, the homoheresy and this general. And so anything we can do to break the myth that homosexuality is universally supported by the population is a fatal blow to the movement. That is to say, every protest against the drag queen story hour destroys this myth. Every Pride Mass protest outside progressivist churches, and there were 1,000 of them this June, drives the movement underground and fearful to publicize its events. Every Sacred Heart billboard, and there were around 175 this year, exposes hundreds of thousands, if not millions, to the message that June belongs to the Sacred Heart and not the Pride movement. All these actions have slowed and impeded the movement. It breaks this false consensus that everyone is on the LGBTQ bandwagon. In fact, it has helped break the myth to such a point that some state legislatures are actually taking actions against story hours and immoral homosexual-oriented books in libraries. The LGBT movement today in America is on the defensive in many areas of the fight. We must press the attack. The second fact is that we have the truth on our side. We are fighting for the truth as revealed by the church. The other side is fighting for error. We oppose this not because we are homophobic or because it's some kind of cultural thing. That's what the other side likes to say. We do this because homosexuality is contrary to the God's designs and a grave offense against the sixth commandment of his law. It is contrary to natural law, which is written on the hearts of every person. St. Paul is very clear about this in his epistle to the Romans, where referring to idolaters, he said, they worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, and for this purpose, God delivered them up to their shameful affections. The Catechism of the Catholic Church enshrines this teaching, which was echoed for 20 centuries by church fathers and doctors and popes and bishops and great saints and moral theologians. The doctrine condemning homosexuality is part of the church's universal, ordinary magisterium and cannot be changed. And so this notion that homosexual unions can have anything that deserves to be sanctified by a blessing is unacceptable. And therefore, we can be assured that we are acting in strict obedience to God's law and with clear conscience. Our action is not motivated by any personal hatred or bigotry, nor does it target any individuals or wish them any physical harm. Our action is peaceful and legal and always in the realm of ideas. That is the most effective way to fight against these threats. We will never stoop to the level of violence that the other side wishes to attach to our cause. And you've seen this policy in action in our TFB student action videos. We have well over 25 years of activism without a single act of violence attributed to our members. However, we have been physically attacked by their tolerance on hundreds of occasions. The final fact I would ask you to consider is that this book makes it clear that pressure from the homosexual movement will not stop halfway, but demand, as it always does, everything. They will want not just the blessings, but liturgical blessings with rituals similar to sacramental marriage. They'll demand the destruction of all moral law and all limitations on God's creation. That is to say, we're in this fight for the long run. It's not going to stop with a single piece of legislation or the acceptance of a Vatican document. Even if we win a battle, there's a war going on. And the violence of the unbridled passions on the other sides will not allow it to stop at half measures. Unbridled passions tend to go to their extremes. The other side wants everything now and forever. They will accept no opposition and will do everything in their power to suppress us. They will not stop at influencing Catholic universities, but they will not be satisfied until they come to your parish, wherever it might be. So Catholics must stand firm and declare inflexibly, non possemus, we cannot do this. We cannot go along with this breaching of the dam of moral law. And in the face of radical church leaders that lead the Catholic astray, we must say we obey God rather than men. We must be inflamed with a greater desire for our cause than that of the other side, for their unbridled passion and hatred of order. So we must take our cause to the end. And our end is we desire the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, foreseen of Fatima. And we can be assured of the help, not of the media or the establishment, but the Queen of Heaven herself. We can have no doubt that she will help us in this struggle. Therefore, we can fight with great confidence. And so we are in the middle of a great fight. Indeed, TFB founder Professor Plinko de Rivera stated 30 years ago, referring to the homosexual revolution in the church, that, quote, there will be an internal struggle within the church, and this internal shock will produce one of the greatest upheavals in history. Today, his prediction is coming to pass. The dam is breached. All hands are needed on deck to push back the waters. Let us go forward, trusting in Our Lady. Thank you very much.